Coming to you live from the Sound System Studios, Dallas, Texas.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I don't care if I never get...
Holy cow!
Baby water! Baby water!
March Madness is upon us, and yes, I'll admit we're all going a little bit crazy. The month of all months for college basketball is here. We've all been waiting for it. Certainly have to get straight into it. We'll skip the conference tourneys. Not even going to get into it at all today. Get a little bit into the NFL, talk about and wrap up a lot of the key signings that went on in the past week and a half since I've last joined you, and thank you for joining me. This is Josh Smith, and this is On Deck. And that would certainly be the NCAA tournament. Did you catch all the games yesterday? I certainly hope you did. 3 versus 14, 2 of them going down, 2 of them being the 3 seeds. And I got to start off with that. Let's start with the NCAA tournament. The first 3 games out of the gates, 3 versus 14 seeds. I noticed that. I'm like, really? The first 3 games? How about that? 3 versus 14 seeds? Then they followed it up in the afternoon yesterday with 3 5 versus 12 games. They were just waiting for something to happen. They were waiting for some upsets, some crazy games, last-second shots. And I forgot what arena it was, but 3 out of the 4 games, it came down to the final shot, the last possession. Whoever had it had a chance to win. I think it was in Jacksonville. I'm pretty sure. That was watching my boys, my Razorbacks last night. Luckily pulled out a great win. It could have been a 5 versus 12 maybe going down. Luckily, Arkansas, the 5 seed, pulled that out. I did have them winning in every bracket. It's kind of become fantasy football, which I'll get into that, how you get asked to all these leagues. I do have one real one, and that's why when I join these other ones, I almost do them for fun, unless money's involved. But then I literally keep it just like the one, if you know what I'm saying. The one you do in the paper like you used to back in the day, had it written in writing. Back to the 3 versus 14 upsets. Great games. So, mentioning that I just did multiple brackets, hey, I'm going to take a chance in one of them because I knew I had a feeling about UAB in one of them, and I had a feeling about Georgia State in the other. Let me get into why. UAB, youngest team in the field, never had a player ever play in the NCAA tournament. Okay, hey, I'm thinking they're going to go in here. They're not going to have any what to expect. They're not. For some reason, you think that big bright lights are going to get caught by those, and they're going to be and they're not going to play good. I thought the other happened. I thought they'd come out, play aggressive. They have nothing to lose. They've never been in any environment like this before. They're just taking it for what it is, stride for stride. Especially kids these days, they're used to this. It's 2015. It's not 1995 or especially 1975 anymore, where when they get to a big city, they're like, oh, man, I ain't never seen this before. No, they've seen it. They've probably been to it already. So this isn't everyone's on TV every week. So seeing these teams upset teams like this anymore really isn't a surprise, but great. Like I said, UAB, youngest team in the field. Great story. Once again, Iowa State had a chance to win at the end. Didn't really get it. And kind of in both stories, UAB and Georgia State beating Baylor, which I'll get to in a minute, they both, the winning teams, the 14 seeds, hit a 3, down by 2 with around a minute left or less to get a 1-point lead, and that's what they won by. 56-55, the final in the UAB-Iowa State game. Great game. I didn't have Iowa State going that far. I wasn't really worried about any of the 3 seeds. Anything past the 2 seed, with my man Charles Barkley, they're terrible. He even said anything, just the top 8 seeds, which would be your 1 and 2 seeds, just really didn't see much threat at anyone past them. So Iowa State, bye-bye. Go home. You can watch the rest of the tournament. Hope it is fun back in Iowa. UAB, a great story for them, losing their football program. A lot of people are going to see them as the underdog. They get to face an 11 seed now. Another upset that I unfortunately did not predict in any of my brackets. I had a good feeling about SMU getting to beat UCLA. Although I had that feeling, okay, UCLA, they may not, they're going to come in with the edge on their shoulder. Hey, I didn't get, they weren't supposed to get in is my point. They're like, oh, you're not supposed to get in. No, they came in just with that feeling. Hey, we're going to prove y'all wrong. They beat SMU and certainly spoiled my bracket because that SMU advancing past the UAB. Well, no, I didn't. I forgot. I had Iowa State. I did have Iowa State advancing to the Sweet 16, so that kind of messes up my bracket. I did. Besides, like I said, the one bracket where I had UAB advancing to play SMU, but then SMU advancing to the Sweet 16, so it does mess that up. But I was just going for goofy, random. And that's the reason I was like, hey, I had a feeling about UAB. In my real bracket, I will admit, that was not my upset I predicted. Had a feeling, though, and that's why I predicted them, or that's why I put it in one of my other little, almost what I want to call fantasy brackets. These are the leagues that people ask me to join in. One of them being KATV Channel 7, the Circle 7 Ranch bracket, which is cool. Get to join that every year. And in one of those, I think that was the one I predicted, the UAB upset. Back to the other upset I did predict. Had this weird, great feeling about Georgia State over Baylor. I know Baylor had size and they're aggressive and certainly should have beaten Georgia State. Had like a 12-point lead with 2.5 minutes left. And the man, R.J. Hunter, coach's son, head coach is Ron Hunter. If you don't remember him, he tore his Achilles while celebrating the Sun Belt Conference Championships. Shout out. Graduate from UALR, so that is Sun Belt Conference territory right there. So I had a feeling about Georgia State. Watched them kind of throughout the year. Knew they had players. Kevin Ware, remember him? The guy who unfortunately gruesomely broke his leg in the final, or for the Elite Eight maybe it was, against Duke a few years ago in Louisville's run to the NCAA Tournament Championship win. Well, he ended up having to transfer back to Georgia State. His father had a stroke, so he needed to get a little bit closer back to home. So he transferred there, especially to get more playing time as well, because of course, coming off a terrible injury. But hey, guess what? Next thing you know, he is Sun Belt Conference Tournament MVP with 17 points in the tournament final game. Back now to the game against Baylor. R.J. Hunter is their main guy. That's coach's son. Well, he's only got 2 points through the first half. Playing not that good. I mean, not really getting the ball much. When the final 2 minutes and 39 seconds, when they're down, I forgot exactly how many. I think 10 or 12, somewhere in that range. Well, he scores 12 points in that amount of time as well. 12 of his 16 points in the final 2.5 minutes. Oh, yeah, hitting the game-winning three-pointer from about 30 feet out. They get a chance down 2. They get the rebound. Baylor's best free throw shooter was on the line with like 10 seconds left or so. Somewhere around there, 10, 15. Had a 1-and-1. Missed the front end of that, as they say, and literally as well on the free throw. Got the rebound. Here comes Georgia State. And even the guys, they're frantic. The analysts, the guys doing the game, what are they doing? They need to drive to the hole. What are they doing? Well, the big guy trying to set almost a pick and roll type thing at the top of the key of the three-point line, just kind of get in the way of R.J. Hunter. Well, R.J. has it, passes it to him, and the guy just kind of tosses it back to him. R.J. Hunter, with about a second or two left, somewhere in there, throws up a three from about 30 feet, drills it. And just, hey, he was on fire. He caught fire at the right time. Literally a 0.5 exact, not much time left at all, 0.21 seconds, nothing left to get a shot off, enough to pretty much touch it, and the game was over. Baylor did get it and heave it up. There was a little heave, but it was no shot to be had. And Georgia State, glad to predict that one. And a thriller. So 3 seeds going down, and that's what I said was yesterday. I said they're going to, and I sent a mass text out to a few of my friends. Shout out to Mitchell, Keith, Shane, Jaron. I sent it out. I knew there was going to be at least one upset. I said, 3 versus 14 seeds to open up the tournament. There's 3 games, 3 of them. They're wanting that for the ratings, and boy, they got it. They got it. And also, to the other picks, Kentucky, I'll just go ahead and get that all the way. That's who I have all the way, and all my, to the rest of the picks I have. Kentucky, I have them going the rest of the way, or the whole way. A few of my picks I got right yesterday. I had the Ohio State upset. The one, like I said, that I also try to predict. I should say try to predict. I was in one of my upset brackets that I did UAB. I had a feeling about SF Austin taking out Utah. That was a close game. Didn't come through for me, at least in the upset bracket. That's what I always call them, the upset bracket. But to the rest of the picks, though, Kentucky going all the way. Wisconsin, Arizona, I have them meeting off in the Elite Eight. Kentucky meeting off, and I had a hard time pick between Kansas and Notre Dame. In my real bracket, I'm pretty sure it was Notre Dame. I've had them but they just had such a going through the whole ACC tournament and winning it all. It means you play more games, so your players are that much more tired. To where Kansas didn't play that many games, they got knocked out a little early. Thus, they could have a little more energy. So I had them in the Sweet 16 battling it out to get to the Elite Eight to face Kentucky, so it's between them two, I know, but I think it was and I switched them up between the brackets I did. It was between Kansas and Notre Dame to face Kentucky, with Kentucky advancing. Wisconsin and Arizona in all my brackets in the Elite Eight. Once again, those two, that was when I was just a toss-up. In my real bracket, it's Wisconsin versus Kentucky. On the left side of your brackets, which would be the Midwest and West regions, I did have Arizona, maybe one or two of them, but I just had this feeling about Wisconsin. I think this year, at least to get to the Final Four and really give a headway with Kentucky, I think it would be a great game. On the right side of your brackets, the East, Villanova and Virginia, the two Vs, I have them battling out in the Elite Eight. Although I do think that Michigan State certainly could give Virginia some fits in the field of 32, which would, I think, is Sunday's game. When I would imagine Virginia gets through Belmont today. Michigan State, I'm pretty sure I have them advancing through Georgia. Last check, they were winning. I knew there were a few games starting as of the show as of right now. I did have one because they're the Great Danes. We'll see what happens. And I did have this in my real bracket, so we'll see what happens. So I'll go ahead and throw it out there. My big upset. Albany Great Danes. They're my Great Danes, baby. I have a Great Dane. I love Great Danes, but this is the one. Albany over Oklahoma. We'll see if it comes true. I don't know if it will or won't. Obviously I don't. But I think that Albany matches up great with Oklahoma. Oklahoma isn't that big. They don't play too many players. You go about 8 deep or so. Albany they haven't played anyone all year. That's what I look at that, and I looked at their schedule. I'm like, man, they even in their non-conference, they don't play anybody. But I have the Great Danes, and I had them the last 2 years. I'm like, third time's a charm, and it's funny, the last 2 years they've almost upset teams. So, Great Danes, do it for me this year. I also have Dayton coming off that crazy win against Boise State, playing pretty much next door. I think they're playing in Columbus, Ohio. Dayton is, so right next door to home. I have them upsetting Providence. That's 11 over 6 seed. Right there, back to back. So I see it, which would be 2 11 versus 14 seeds, 2 sets facing off in the field of 32, which will be crazy to see because, as I mentioned earlier, UCLA knocked off SMU. UAB knocked off Iowa State, so you have 1 11 versus 14 already happening. And I try to predict one because every 2 or 3 years that's going to happen. You've seen it, you go back, you look, it happens. Try to predict it this year. Maybe there'll be 2. I tried to predict 1. I was almost right. I was just in the wrong bracket. So we'll see if Dayton could upset Providence. But overall, Villanova or Virginia had a tough time between this one in the East, but I went with, I think it was in my real bracket. I'm pretty sure I should have gotten that down in front of me. I know it's written down somewhere in all my papers here. I don't feel like scrambling through so you can hear paper going all over the place. But I think it was Virginia, I'm pretty sure. I have them beating Villanova. Just Villanova, and because that was what it was. Villanova hadn't played anybody all year. I mean, their competition really isn't what it used to be. They had to play a lot more teams that aren't in the conference anymore, so I just see Virginia making a run in this, because my point is I have Duke on the other side, so I see another matchup with Duke and Virginia. Although, like I said, I did the flip-flop, I know, like I did in Arizona and the Wisconsin and the West region. In this region, I also had Villanova, I'm sure, a time or two in one of those other the fantasy brackets. But so far, it's Kentucky, Wisconsin, and Virginia. So we have 2 number 1 seeds and a number 2 seed, and of course, like I said, finish it off with the number 1 seed Duke. I have them advancing all the way, getting past Gonzaga in the Elite Eight, and I have Gonzaga just I think at least one of them I had them advancing past Duke, finally getting to the Final Four. I'm pretty sure they've never been to the Final Four. I'm pretty sure it's always at Elite Eight because that was when, if you remember, Mr. Morris, who cried infamously. Because I always thought that was the Final Four game. That was an Elite Eight game. What was that, back in 06 or somewhere in there, 07, somewhere in that time frame, when he cried on the court so graciously. That was an Elite Eight game. I'm pretty sure Gonzaga's never advanced to the Final Four, so maybe they'll get there this year. But I'm pretty sure Duke, after getting eliminated last year by Mercer in the first round, well, I always still call it the first round, or the field of 64, the second round, I think this year, certainly past Robert Morris, unless they're going to set the precedent and be the first number 1 seed to get knocked off by a 16 seed. Then they'd have to face San Diego State or St. John's, was, I think, another easy task. And then Utah, Georgetown, I think they pose a little bit of a threat, but what they played this year, they certainly, the way they played and what they played competition-wise, certainly better, far greater than Georgetown and Utah, so that then gets them to, as I mentioned, the Elite Eight. game, which most likely could be Gonzaga, especially now as I've had no worries with any of the three. Anything past the 2 seed, I wasn't too worried about them advancing. Now Iowa State's out of it, so Gonzaga's got to face UCLA or UAB. Certainly see my point, too, is they should have a nice, easy ride to the Elite Eight. But there you go. Elite Eight, Kentucky, Notre Dame versus Kansas. We'll see about that one. Wisconsin, I think they get past Arkansas, North Carolina winner. Although, go Hogs. Let's get past North Carolina. And then I see them, Wisconsin facing off easily. Arizona should have a nice ride. 6 versus they're going to if they beat. They have a 10 seed right now, Ohio State, and then they have to either face a 6 seed Xavier or 14 seed Georgia State. So they also have a pretty easy ride to the Elite Eight. And in the East region, Villanova versus Virginia. And then in the South, Duke versus Gonzaga, as I just mentioned. So we'll see if I'm right about those. I know, as I said, the only ones that I really have obviously getting at least to the Elite Eight, which I'll do a show certainly before next weekend until we get to those games. We'll see if I'm right about that. If we can get Kentucky versus either Kansas or Notre Dame, which we'll get to be talking about next weekend, which I think those 3 teams shall advance to the Sweet 16. And then eventually talking about the Elite Eight. And Wisconsin versus Arizona, Villanova versus Virginia matchup, and Duke versus Gonzaga, and certainly great matchups to look forward to. I can't wait. All right, and now on deck, though, we certainly need to get to the NFL and some of these these free agent signings last week. There we go, these signings. That's what they would be called. Signings, if I can say it correctly. We all talked about, of course, I talked about it. I'm sure you talked about it as well. Nick Ndamukong to the Dolphins. Of course, the Dolphins lost defensive tackle Jared Audrick to the Jags, which Jags are trying to buff up now, for a 6-year, $114 million deal suited. So certainly that's what they needed to do. They lost the defensive tackle. They're certainly wanting to secure the defensive tackle spot, and so they did so. Des Bryant, we all know here what's going on here, and it's so funny how that aforementioned how I did a couple weeks ago, the Des Bryant video, well, that's still to not surface. It was going to surface. It's about to surface any day now. Even Schefter's been reporting on it for months now. He's been doing a story on it. Anyway, he's been tagged by Dallas. No one's going to sign him for that price, and no one's going to match him. He's staying with Dallas. And I mentioned this to my buddy Ian Mitchell. I mentioned him earlier. The whole deal before free agency began, even when pretty much when the playoffs were going on, Dallas was how they were going to tag either Des Bryant and sign DeMarco Murray or vice versa. They're going to tag one and sign the other. And same with Denver with Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas. They're going to tag one and sign the other. Well, that didn't go to plan. Both teams, though, did keep their star stud wide receivers. As I mentioned, Des Bryant staying with the franchise tag, which is around $13 million for wide receivers with the Eagles. I'm about to mention the Eagles with the Cowboys. DeMarco Murray, they weren't too happy about that down here, and I'll get to another one they're certainly not too happy about, or at least some people aren't. But DeMarco Murray does go to the Eagles, as of course the Eagles lost LaShawn McCoy to the Buffalo Bills. Well, DeMarco gets a 5-year, $42 million deal, about $7 to $8 a year, and about $18 million guaranteed DeMarco gets. And Dallas was offering him, like I said, and it was right around there, the $5.125 million mark. He wanted $2 to $3 million more a year, which I'll mention another player and how all players do that. They want 2-3 more a year because over time that's $6 to $9 million. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's like an extra year somewhere. So he took the extra money and he ran. He didn't want to stay with his team. He fought. That's it's just the only thing when you fight through all the games you go through, all the practices, all the workouts, all the videos with your team and your coaches, and it's not like they've changed much recently. I mean, they've kind of kept the same staff, the same players, so it's not like he's wanting to get out of there, I wouldn't imagine, unless there maybe is something going on behind closed doors we don't really know about. Anyway, he wants to leave the team he's been with since he's been drafted to go to a team that he's been his rival for the last few years. It's just so weird when players do that just for a few more $1 million a year. And not even a few sometimes, 2 to 3. I mean, 2 or 3, I guess And also, where were you at with the Cowboys last year? I mean, I guess with the Eagles, you're about the same, and maybe you think, hey, the Eagles have a better shot than this coming year than my Cowboys do, or my Cowboys, my used to be Cowboys. Mention another team up in the Northeast. How about the New York Jets? Pat said, hey, no, they don't want Darrelle Revis anymore. They don't want to get his contract, because I think it was like a $20 million. This year he was going to owe $20 million. That was like a 2-year deal he signed with him, which is just ridiculous. $20 million a year, especially for him. Well, the Jets signed him for a 5-year, $70 million deal. $33 million guaranteed. And, of course, rejoins his Jets, who he spent most of his career with, and they've really been making some moves. Signed Antonio Cromartie, so now they get to reunite. They were once the duo on the outsides, the corners, Antonio Cromartie and Darrelle Revis in New York. Well, the Pats have kind of been just letting people go. Not only did they let Darrelle go, they let Akeem Ayers go, defensive end, defensive lineman, linebacker, just kind of that hybrid player. Let him go he went to the Rams. Brandon Browner goes to the Saints. That was a cornerback, originally with Seattle year before last, and it's like they got all these players last year. They got a lot of players last year, literally for a year, and letting them go. They signed them to these big deals, knowing that they could cut them the next year, and then of course they'll have some kind of anyway. Point being, they did it for the Super Bowl. They made this great run for a year, almost like Denver did last year, but their plan succeeded and Denver's did not. It just kills me. Hate that. But they let Brandon Browner go. That's a pretty good cornerback. And they let Shane Vereen go. Not that he's the best running back, but they always have a stable of backs, as you call it, but they let Shane Vereen go. So we'll see how the Pats roll into this next year. That's what they usually seem to do, just kind of regroup, refocus. Hey, we got a new group of players, same system, let's roll. Very intrigued to see how that happens. Demaryius Thomas, franchise tag by, as I mentioned him earlier, of course, with the whole Denver was going to do with Demaryius and Julius Thomas, Thomas E. Thomas, which I love saying that, Thomas E. Thomas, the Thomas Bros, the Thomas Twins. Well, no longer, unfortunately. Julius goes to the Jaguars, 5-year, $46 million deal, about $9 million a year. Denver offered him about a 5-year, $40 million year before the year started. They offered Julius and Demaryius both offers before the year, which would have been great. They would have signed him, gotten the money figured out. They had it figured out, these deals, hey, because it's so, and I'll get to the Peyton thing, and that's the thing, you could take less money, but even just their roles in the NFL are just ridiculous. Just what they let you do and don't let you do, and the way they can't just let you do what you almost want to do. And I just said that almost redundantly, but that's it. The NFL just doesn't let you get away with a lot of things, or you can't do things as if you think you could. Like, hey, we just want to sign. Obviously, there's just cap situations with the salary cap. I mean, that's the thing with baseball. I mean, that's the thing. You can cut them as you go. You pay them as you go. You can pay them as much as you want. However much money you got, you can spend. And that's kind of the cool and fun thing sometimes. But then also it's kind of, as you see as the Yankees, but it doesn't work all the time, obviously, as you try to buy your teams. Well, they don't want you to do that, although they're slowly but surely every year it seems like they increase it $10 million the salary cap in the NFL to let. That's the thing. They make so much money, and these players want so much money. Well, they're going to be able to have to pay these guys. So, like I said, if they make so much money, it's like, okay, we're going to have to increase the cap because these guys are wanting more and more money, which I'll get to that in a funny minute about how Elway and how he was the highest paid quarterback ever. An article I will get to in a minute, and how things have changed in a hurry, and how they have in every sport, really. But Julius does go to the Jaguars. Going to make $6 million more over 5 years than if he would have signed with Denver before the year started, which I hate that. And it's just like, man, go to the Jags? I mean, really? They got a lot of young talent they're trying to acquire there, and you're going to rely on, Blake Bortles to come through? I mean, I know they have Justin Blackmon, Marquise Lee on the outside, great young talent at wide receiver, but who's their running back going to be? They don't really have a running back. They have this kind of slash guy that somehow has great games. Denard Robinson, he'll slash up some pretty not-so-good defenses, but some decent defenses, but still, I mean, he's not a pure running back. And then Toby Gerhart, I know you signed him last year to a deal, but he proved to not be much. So you don't have a running back, so you're really going to, anyway, I know it's kind of like Denver, but Denver can certainly win and wanted to, certainly had a better run game than Jacksonville. Go look it up the stats. I mean, Denver was only like 15th in run last year. It's way better than the Jags. So just that, and then they go to Jacksonville, a franchise that's maybe on the outs of the NFL, one of the 2 or 3 that are always talking about moving or going to at least a different city. My point is, maybe that's what he's hoping for. Maybe there's in talks of them that team going to a different location. I don't know about that. I just don't understand that. Julius have fun in Jacksonville over Denver. But I hate it for you. I know Denver's going to try to find someone. I know that has, like I said, a lot to do with their offense, and I pretty much called that last week, or the week of my last show, saying I don't think he's going to stay in Denver, and it probably has a lot to do with not only the money, and Denver didn't have much money to spend. They didn't. But also, I think it has a lot to do with they just were going in a different direction with their offense. They're not going to do a lot what they were doing. Heck, the year before last, when he had obviously was a lot more injured this year, but year before last, he was, like I said, spread out, which I mentioned this in the last show, spread out wide in the slot, or at least in the slot, 30% of the time when he was on the field. This last year, it was like 15, replaced by Tammy a lot of the time and someone else. I'm like, what? He destroys in the slot. AKA, and that was the game, and he was in the slot early in the year. I forgot what. I think it was the Jets, and I'm pretty sure it was the Jets. I was in Vegas watching the game, but he catches a slant pass. He has like a corner on him. He's in the slot, runs just a slant about the 5-yard line, downside hut, you run 3, 4, 5 yards, and you cut straight toward the goalpost. Wide open, not even close. Manny puts it right on the numbers when everything's flowing. Touchdown, and that was that game, and this is the point when he was saying, it's so easy, or something along those lines is what he was yelling right there in front of that camera, and you could easily hear it because that mic picked it up. And I was like, wow, but he was balling out because he was on pace to break the record for most tight ends, I think in a season, but also by Gronkowski by a tight end. He had like 9 or 10 or 11 in the first 6, I forgot how many. I mean, he was going out of control. It just hurts not to see that because he is such a beast in the red zone. When Denver, I say Arkansas because Arkansas sometimes struggles in the red zone, watching them a lot last year. But Denver just struggled a lot in the red zone, not having a target like that when he was injured. But when he was healthy, Denver was just rolling along in that early part of the season. Such a crucial element in the red zone. But I know they can find someone else. They did get Owen Daniels, but I'm like, come on, Owen Daniels, like 31, 32. He's no Julius Thomas. I know what your offense you're going to, and I know Owen Daniels has been in Kubiak's offense since pretty much he was born. I don't care, though. I want someone that's athletic. Teach him how to block. He can block. I promise you, he's a big guy. He had to block people out in basketball once before. I just hate losing him. It just hurts. I loved having him as a threat, such a huge threat. And you have Sanders, you have Thomas, and then you have Thomas. But it doesn't get better than that in the NFL as far as tight end and 2 wide receivers improves. I can show you games, I can show you stats. And unfortunately, if they would have played healthy all year long, Thomas the only one that didn't, they would have put up by far the best trio of. You take your top 2 wide receivers and tight end, and they would have put up by far the best numbers. It probably still got close too with Thomas on the field half the year. All right, there's my spiel on Thomas. Terrence Knighton, too. Denver couldn't afford him. And they did have a little bit of money probably because they only signed him. The Redskins did. Terrence Knighton, pot roast, to a 1-year, $4 million deal. They did lose Brian Arapaho, a guy usually kind of likes to stuff up the middle, their linebacker. Well, they lost him, so they pick up Terrence Knighton. 1-year, $4 million deal, kind of a prove-it role. Hey, you do good this year, we'll pay you more next year, we promise you. We'll assign you to a 3 or 4 year deal, proving that the salary in the market now for those top DNs can go anywhere from $7-8 million to $9, $10, $11 million. So he's looking for one of those paydays. So that was another reason why Denver knew they really didn't feel like having to sign him. They picked up a couple of guys in draft the last couple of years, a couple of guys in draft, looking for those guys to pick, to step up. And they did sign Terrence Knighton. That was the reason they did, was because Jack Del Rio, well, that's where Terrence Knighton was, at Jacksonville with Jack Del Rio. Well, of course, he was let go of there and hired as Denver's defensive coordinator. Well, here comes Terrence Knighton right along in free agency. Luckily, it was just perfect timing for him to come over. Denver signs him to like a 2-year, $4 or $5 million deal, not much. And so he was, going to live up to it, especially since he blew up when he came to Denver, but wanted a little bit more now. And good luck in Washington. Good fit for Washington, great fit, but it's just like one of those things. It's like, man, get paid a little bit less to stay with a team that can easily contend for a Super Bowl year in and year out, or just go to a new team to make more money. More money usually seems to win, always. Jeremy Maclin reunites with Andy Reid. He 5-year, $55 million with the Chiefs, $11 million a year for Jeremy Maclin. Great fit for the Chiefs. They let Dwayne Bowe go, which I called that last week. Knew that was going to have to happen. Of course, Randall Cobb. It's funny how this goes in order. Randall Cobb with the Packers. Of course, I did mention this last time. He stays with the Pack 4-year, $40 million, so that's $10 million a year. I mentioned Jeremy Maclin at $11 million a year, and right underneath that, Torrey Smith signs with the 49ers 5-year, $45 million. So that's about $9 million a year or so. I think it was 5-year, $40 million. Yeah, it was 5-year, $40 million. for Torrey Smith. So $8 million a year it was for him. So Torrey Smith, $8 million a year wide receiver. Randall Cobb about $10 million. Jeremy Maclin worth, I guess, around $11 million, which I think Cobb and Maclin right there deserve around that $10-11 million mark. Torrey Smith, yeah, I guess about $8 million. He's kind of fallen off. I don't know about 8. I'd say about $5-6 million, but that's, hey, just the price to pay to be in the NFL and be a wide receiver. And then speaking of earlier of the Eagles, and it's like, who are they going to get now? They've let running backs go. Well, they did get DeMarco Murray, letting, of course, they let Sean McCoy go. They get DeMarco Murray, and they also got Ryan Matthews. So you think, hey, DeMarco Murray's enough, but maybe that's what analysts said, reading articles, and that's what I think as well. Hey, DeMarco Murray took a heck of a load at his time at Dallas, especially last year. You want to get someone to fill up that backup role on third downs, or certainly so he doesn't have to carry it 350, 400 times again this year. Touch it that many times, I should say. So Ryan Matthews certainly will be the backup role to DeMarco Murray, but certainly a pretty good 1-2 punch up in Philly. We'll see what they can do with the quarterback situation, though, and how they stand at wideout now that they don't have Jeremy Maclin. Frank Gore, that was another guy, though, that they were going to sign, which I have to get to him now. Funny story. So they do get Ryan Matthews to back up DeMarco Murray. Well, that wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was Frank Gore. 49ers don't want to re-sign him. So the deal was reported pretty much done with the Eagles. Not so fast, my friend. Lee Corso would love to jump in and say, signs with the Indianapolis Colts, who were certainly looking for a running back. Get him for $3 million, or I should say 3 years, $12 million. So about $4 million a year it averages out, but I think he gets $8 million in his first 2 years. Or 8 or no, it was right over $8 million, to where he makes, he gets more of his money the first 2 years, so they can let him go or do something with that last year if they want to. Because I don't see Frank Gore playing 3 years. Andre Johnson, another name who I mentioned, and I did mention this team. I mentioned, just because I like to see him with the Broncos, but that was a team I was reading about, being that they were going to lose Julius Thomas. Maybe they could sign him to a deal. Didn't happen for the Broncos or the Seahawks, who I also mentioned, or for the Chiefs, because why did I mark the Chiefs out? Because they got Jeremy Maclin. So Andre Johnson, the fourth team I mentioned, well, that's those Colts that I was just talking about. He signs with the Colts for a 3-year, $21 million deal. So there you go. He's worth $7 million. Andre Johnson is still worth about $7 million, I guess. Torrey Smith, around $8 million. Cobb, $10 million a year. Anna Maclin is around $11 million a year, man. Your franchise tag's up to about $13 million. And your top 2 wide receivers, I know it was Calvin Johnson. I want to say it was Fitzgerald who had the other huge contract. And they're up to like this 15, 16, 17, $18 million a year range, somewhere in that range. And that's what Demaryius and Thomas and Des Bryant are pretty much holding off. We're like, hey, until you show us that, we'll keep doing this franchise thing. But, you're going to need to pay us some money sometime soon. Because you see what they're making, we want $15 a year. And hopefully, I don't know about Des, but hopefully Demaryius is just a great guy, being humble, especially his background. You think Des the same thing, but Des has had his up and downs, and he could just be one of those guys that he just wants the money. But I hope that, especially for both of them, to be with the teams that drafted them, to stay with them through the thick and thin, I'd love to see both of them sign long-year deals and say, okay, I don't have to have 17. I'll settle for 15.5 or 15 or so on and so forth. And that's why I just want to go to him, just like I wanted to go to Manning. You know how much you made in your career? I hate this whole, they need to do, they're worth this much. That's fine that they're worth that much. How about be a humble person and realize you're making already 10, 12, 13 million, no less. You want 17, I know, but how about 13, 14's fine. 15, like I said. You know how much money that is? Give me a break. Go on to the next couple of guys here. Byron Maxwell, the reason I mentioned him because he was one of those top corners on the list from Seattle's great defense. Well, they've lost another key member, so we'll see how they... Certainly last year they lost a few members to the free agency. This year just a couple, not too many. I think Seattle will just be fine because the 49ers are losing players left and right to retirement. With the latest guy this last week, played just a few years, the other linebacker now that's retired, they're going to be, and he was going to replace Patrick Willis, and he's now retired because of health. He just wants to preserve them. Hey, I don't want to have walking around not knowing who anybody is when I'm 45, 50, 55, 60. So smart for him, especially if he was smart with even the money he's made. And he's not even a $10 million a year man, as I was talking about earlier. And the other big name that I have to get to last here, and it leads to my story of the week, Greg Hardy, name that's still not cleared to play in the NFL, though. and may not even fulfill his whole contract next year, but did sign a 1 year, and that's why it was just kind of just temporary almost in a way. 1 year, 11 to 13 million. It starts out at about $11 million, but it can get up to $13 million if he plays all his games and has this many sacks, so on and so forth. Yeah, the Cowboys, of course, they sign him. Boy, and Big D is happy, and boy, some people are upset about it. I don't know if you've seen or heard about this, but there has been oh my gosh. So down here, of course, being in the sports world of Dallas, everyone knows about Dale Hansen, two-time AP Sportscaster of the Year for WFAA, the ABC affiliate here in Dallas. He went off. Had enough, and at first you didn't know what. He just okay. He just kind of talked about it, and then he had his moment, his rant. I forgot what it's called, but Hansen going off, or Hansen something, and he did. Starts off, and I'll go through some of the stuff he said, and some of this is pretty much verbatim. I wrote it down. He said, is there no line you won't cross? No crime you won't accept? Is there no behavior you will not tolerate? You can do illegal drugs and still play for the Cowboys. Drive drunk, killing a teammate, putting everyone at risk on the road. There's a place on this team for you. Rob a department store? We got a place for you. Now, beat a woman and play with the star on your helmet. And, of course, he goes into talking about getting a jersey, or how the jersey is on sale now online. And he says, sure, go buy it for your sister, your mom, your aunt, your daughter, or something along those lines. And then explain what he does afterward. As in, hey, yes, here, yeah, wear this jersey. We cheer for him now. He might beat women, but that's okay. What he does on game day is more important. And he just kept going on and on. And says, sure. And even this has really got me. He talking about the jersey, and he says, sure, that's all fine and dandy until he shows up to take your sister or daughter out for a night on the town. And then says this. He literally says this. Because if he does that, you know you'll shoot his ass through the glass. And I was like, wow. And you almost can hear almost commentary from the background of people like just laughing, or almost like, wow, or just something going on in the background like, wow, he is really taking it off. Then he says the irony about all this, and it is kind of ironic, Cowboys Vice President Charlotte Jones Anderson, of course Jerry's daughter, is on the NFL Personal Conduct Committee. He said, what a committee that must be, and so on and so forth. And then he calls out the coach, Coach Garrett, called him a fraud or maybe a hypocrite, saying that he wants the most disciplined players on his team, or maybe he is just a puppet we all suspect him to be. Yeah. Wow. You get him, Dale Hansen. That's fine with me. And you did it on live TV on a newscast? You did go off, my friend, and salute to you for talking down and dirty to the Dallas Cowboys, because you've seen enough, and that's what he said. Could you dig them yourself any deeper? When he thought the Cowboys have dug themselves as deep as they can, they go get the shovel and dig themselves a little bit deeper. Well, we'll see how this all concludes. And I can't wait to watch more of Mr. Hansen, as I do each and every week. And all of us here and all the stations love Mr. Hansen. He is just we should look him up. Definitely different sportscaster, and definitely does things in a funny manner. But I love the guy. Great guy. I've met him a couple different times. Nothing conclusive, but I can tell he's just one of those kind of guys. How he's going to tell you how he feels and how it is. But another week, another edition of On Deck. Another week, another edition of On Deck. Thanks for listening. Again, this is Josh Smith. Don't forget, check me out online, Josh Smith Sports. Of course, follow me on Twitter, Josh A. Smith 7. That's OT. Did I just throw a little OT in there? I don't even know what accent that is, but at Josh A. Smith 7. That's where you can follow me on Twitter. Until next week, my friends. Soak up as much March Madness as you can this weekend. I'll get back to you early next week. We'll talk about the first couple of rounds here. We'll talk about and preview the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. I cannot wait for the rest of the games this weekend. I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. Sit back, relax, get you some popcorn, some steaks, some hamburgers, hot dogs, cheese dips, whatever you eat. Get it on down. Enjoy some basketball. It only happens once a year. And me personally, I'll be doing some ribs and brisket, stuff of that nature. Had never done it. I'm going to try that out. Till next week, though, it's On Deck. This is Josh Smith.